and thanks for staying on LN 24/7. This is Politics Now. My name is Morno Balagbogo. Well, today on the show, we'll focus on the 2025 budget proposal. It's currently in the National Assembly for Defense. We've seen various heads of MDAs and ministers of this government come to defend the proposal. For some, approved, for some, rejected. So let's give you a rundown of our talking points. First, we'll look at, can sectorial allocations deliver mandate? Talking about the Renewed Hope mandate. How did the budget of 2024 impact the lives of Nigerians? That's a lot of questions that the National Assembly Chairman Committee on Budget and Planning is currently arguing with those in charge of various parastatals in the country and also ministries. Also, from the National Assembly, there's been a lot of complaint about the low funding for capital projects, of which they say will impact the masses. Well, the Labour Party disagrees with that. But we'll also look at omissions and irregularities in the proposed budget as postulated by CSOs and concerned governance agencies. Non-governmental agencies, to be precise. Then finally, we'll x-ray the 2024 budget performance. Well, joining us on the show today, live in our studios right here in Abuja, is Honorable Mike Omogbehin, who is a PDP chieftain and a former member of the House of Representatives from Ondo State. Once again, Honorable, thank you so much for being with us on the program.
Thank you very much, madam.
And Happy New Year to you. I mean, it's been a year of renewed hope. And the president says it's time for a restoration. Okay, so we're fully on board with the president on that. Okay, so let's bring you up to speed with what's going on. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's budget of restoration is currently undergoing defense by stakeholders in his government. Let's give you just a reminder, of some of the sectoral allocations of the budget. We've got infographics for that. First, we'll look at defense and security at 4.91 trillion naira, infrastructure at 4.06 trillion naira, education 3.5 trillion naira, health 2.4 trillion naira. And the budget is to be funded through debt 69%, loans 28%, and asset sales 2%. The budget is expected to have a deficit of 13.39 trillion. And the budget's key assumptions are quite ambitious, and government will need to take bold steps to achieve its target. Now, the National Assembly over the last weekend had expressed concerns over the wide gap between recurrent and capital expenditures that was in the 2024 budget, citing the low level of fund releases for capital projects as a major obstacle, and to achieving tangible development. Now, at a joint session between the chairman of the Senate and House committees on appropriations and the Presidential Economic Team to review the 2025 appropriation bill, they argued that capital projects are the most direct way for Nigerians to benefit from government activities, as recurrent expenditures primarily serve a limited segment of the population. The 2024 fiscal year, initially pegged at 28.7 trillion naira, was revised up to 35.06 trillion naira to accommodate for 3.2 trillion naira for Renewed Hope infrastructure projects and 3 trillion naira for additional recurrent expenditures. These adjustments were approved following a request by President Bola Tinubu to address critical infrastructure needs and operational demands. Now, despite the budget expansion, the 2024 budget performance has been underwhelming, according to a report by the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun. And the report revealed that while recurrent expenditures achieved a 43% implementation rate, capital expenditures lagged significantly at 25% only. So we have a former lawmaker with us in the building. Honorable Mike, good to have you once again. it's another fiscal year, 2025. I mean, I thought this wasn't the case. I think by this time last year, we probably had the budget, up and running and fully approved and assented as law. And here we were kind of running backwards. But what are your comments so far on what has been presented at the National Assembly?
Thank you very much. Like you observed, it would have been very, very important and good for us to actually see clearly in public space the positions and the evaluation of the performances of the 2024 budget. I've searched everywhere. I've asked friends. I've actually looked at here to see what is the position. And that is what's supposed to preempt, to come even before the 25 or to be in the opening paragraph of 2025 budgets. As a lawmaker, I would want to look at what was the performance of the previous year budget so that I can know whether actually we are going to restore or whether we actually have nothing to restore. But like you have rightly said, from the sketches we have put together, the recurrent performed 45% and then the capital, 25%. Now, like you will understand, no nation grows without capital development. No nation grows without, as a project manager, my emphasis has always been project, because it is project that add value to whether be it a corporate organization or a nation. If you do not implement project and successfully so, then they cannot be grown. You cannot generate employments and you cannot create wealth. So it's disheartening that the 24 budget, though I am just hearing this from you, I have not established, performed, that the capital budget performed just by 25%. It is disheartening. So one may be forced to call the question, what are we restoring? But having said that, I want to take a very good look of the 2025 budget. It's not as if the hope is totally lost. I'm sitting here, I'm not going to talk just criticizing for the sake of criticism because I'm from the position. Because I am first and foremost Nigerian, and the interest of our people must be paramount in our mind at every given time. Politics aside, we need to put in place policies, we need to assist ourselves to make sure that governance gets to the people. Now, we are having a budget of restoration of 49.7 trillion in 2025. In 2024, we have 35.03 or 45 trillion. Now, taking a look, one would assume that we have a growth of about 36.62%. It is the difference between the budget of 2024 and 2025.
In percentages, yeah.
On the face value, one would think that we have an increase of about 36.62%. But if you look at it critically from the hard currency angle, in comparison of the international market, we're actually having a lesser budget than in 2025 than what we had in 2024. So what are we restoring? We must ask ourselves. If you look at the exchange rate in 2024, the exchange rate as of January was about between 850 to 900. And as at that time, we had a budget of 35.6. So it will be giving us a dollar value of about 37 billion euro. But today we are having 49.7. And let us take, without argument, let's take the government basis of the budget itself, 1,500.
Yeah.
So we'll be having 33. So you can see that if you deduct 33 from 37, it is not actually a growth per se. Even if in the Naira term, we are having a growth of about 36 point something. So having taken that, now, what is the premise, of the income? How do the government want to fund this income? I'm going to make my observations and let Nigerians listen and do the analysis. Let my former colleagues in the National Assembly take a closer look at this and see how feasible this budget is and what hope actually is being restored. We have a revenue target of about 34.8 trillion. All right? And then we have the borrowing of about 13 trillion. The premise of this income is that Nigeria will be selling or will be generating 2.06 barrel of oil every day at a market price, selling price of $75 per barrel, all right? And that then exchange rate of 1,500. Now, the first question we should ask, if we are estimating that we are going to be selling or trading 2.06 barrel of oil per day, what is currently our OPEC quota? What is currently our OPEC quota? Our current OPEC quota is 1.5 billion barrel per day. And in the last understanding, this quota is supposed to subsist in December of 2005. As the government opened negotiation with OPEC, have they gotten the tentative approval of how the difference of 500 barrels per day is going to be met? So from that very premise, you can see yourself that there seems to be a shortfall ab initio, even before we start the implementation of that budget. Well, maybe I should stop there and then let's see how we progress, and then we can begin to look at. I would have loved to take you again to see to talk actually about the Nigerian current debt basis. As at June, second quarter of last year, we were 134 billion or trillion naira in debt, which is about $91.3 billion. All right. Now we are also talking about adding another 13 trillion to it. If we continue in this manner, before the end of 2027, we'll be nearing over $200 trillion debts. Now, do we have infrastructure on ground to reflect this borrowing? All right. So these are part of issues that I think my former colleagues in the National Assembly must take into consideration when scrutinizing this budget and making recommendations properly and adjust to what is adjustable, and then take points away during their budget oversight function.
Now, in my conversations with economics, they will tell you that borrowing is not necessarily bad. But in a situation whereby we are having to do all of these borrowings and it doesn't really reflect on the masses, that is the major concern of every Nigerian. So how do you balance that?
You see, borrowing to finance project, borrowing to finance capital project is not bad. Ordinarily, when you borrow, it enhances your gearing ratio. That is, what are you using it? Your own income, you borrow, you get it. But borrow becomes very dangerous when you use significant amount of your earning to service such loan. All right? In 2025 budget, federal government has provided 16.327 trillion out of a budget of 49.7. We are going to use significant amount of 16.327 trillion to service such budget. Now, you can now see the danger of why Nigerians may not understand the economic principles or the economic theories of financial theories when professionals talk to say that borrowing is not bad. It is not that the idea of borrowing that is bad, it is the idea of the implementation. What did you use the borrowing for?
Which is a significant question that they were asking the finance minister,
yes,
only for him to say that this is a conversation that should be had in closed doors. And they had to send journalists away. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I was coming to that. Senator Nengi, in his usual characteristics, I follow it. And he asked a question to say, we have to, looking at the performances of the budget and all, what have you. And they asked, there's nothing wrong in the executive section. Nothing wrong. As a parliamentarian myself, sometimes nitty-gritty issues have to be.
What is it that will be said in the closed door that is not worth the public getting to be aware of?
There's no way. Time to come, the public will get to know about it. And don't forget, who are the public? The representative of the public are there, 360 of them and 109.
But Nigerians are curious. Because the question put forward to the Minister of Finance is a very valid question.
Listen to me. It is part of the procedure of National Assembly of the Parliament to have open and executive sections. So I don't know specifically what it disclosed in the open section. It is left for the man who is asked to ask for an executive section. It is also left for National Assembly to grant him. I mean, it could be that we are still working on the 2024 budget because we have extended the capital budget up to, March or April of next year. This could be explanations that, may not be very, for certain reasons, you may not want to say. He would like to give the detail to the representative of the people. Let's take it. But as time goes on, there is no way that we are not going to see it. But I would have preferred a situation, however, that the finance minister is actually prepared and that we have restricted and we have restricted ourselves towards the 8 and perhaps 9 assembly have achieved running a budget, from January to December. That is acceptable within the larger international communities. As we are doing now, moving our budget into the subsequent year makes it a little bit difficult for international relationships, financial relationships, and other nations, waiting for us to complete the previous year budget before going into this year budget. I don't know why National Assembly or the government of Tinubu decides to actually alter what we had achieved in the 8th and the 9th Assembly. Now, one of the reasons why borrowing may not be actually, or people do not understand, when you are borrowing and you are having a 7.53 billion expenditure of personnel is provided in the budget. You are borrowing, you are having an overhead of 1.06. These are all recurrent expenditure. You are borrowing your pension, that is statutory. There is nothing you can do about pension of about 985 billion naira. That is saving minimum. Now, what I do not understand in an economy where you want to, in a budget where you want to borrow, and you are doing debt services of about 16.32 billion. Yet you are making provision of service-wide vote of 2.578 billion. Do you know what service it is? What service-wide vote is? It's otherwise known as contingency. What is the contingency? Now, most of the time, contingency expenditures are on recurrent expenditure. So these are the reasons why some of us, or some people, will call into question the reason for borrowing. I would have expected that a nation that is borrowing must find every way to cut down seriously on its recurrent expenditure. So these are the issues. If you look at the budget of 2025, the main capital development is just 9.912 trillion. And we are going to borrow how much? We are borrowing about 13 trillion. And the main trust capital budget for infrastructural development will be about 9.92. Now, what is the crude? Look at the percentage of what we are going to commit to the main capital development vis-a-vis what we have borrowed and vis-a-vis what we are paying in debt servicing. This is where the problem lies. And like I said, I am not here to actually talk about opposition from the perspective of opposition. But by putting this thing there, perhaps if we have some of my colleagues in the House to be listening to me, we want to take a critical and second look at the budget before them, and then before they reach a conclusive decisions that will be beneficial to all Nigeria. As we move ahead, we're going to be talking about sectoral allocations and look at the feasibility and how it may necessarily impact on the people of Nigeria and whether this budget will actually be a budget of restoration.
Now, which leads me to the first question and our talking point where I talked about if this will actually do what it's supposed to do. Because it's building on more of like the template of what we had in 2024. So do you see a situation whereby we would have to have additional, budgets to support what is already proposed?
Well, I will be surprised because like I said, I look at the service-wide vote of 2 is large, and I think I don't want to think for government, but I look at it that perhaps because of the abysmal low allocation to agriculture, for example,
which is something we decried. The very 800 billion
naira. All right.
What will that do?
I'm coming. Why countries like Ireland have just increased their budgetary provisions for agriculture? They increased it by about 8.1%. That is additional 158 euros is added to it. And this is the package somewhere. Now, I want to believe that perhaps from this service-wide vote, federal government intend, I am thinking for them, and I think that will be appropriate, the federal government will be thinking of actually intervention, using this intervention. If that is done from that, then we can now say, okay, we are talking about food security. We are talking of how to enhance the life of the people, all right? And then we look at head 2.6 trillion. Says it.
But when you look at this budget, does it drive diversification of the economy? Because I recall when Dele Alake, the Minister for Mining and Steel, was doing his defense, it was rejected because last year he projected he was going to do 10 billion and he exceeded that with 37 billion. But yet the lawmakers were like, there's so much potential in this particular sector. So why is the budget not reflecting to be able to deliver better than what it has done in the past? So when we do a budget, of course, it's just a budget. It's not as if the money is there. Does it underplay the capability to deliver in terms of diversifying the economy?
You know, it looks like our budget and perhaps economy has been a mono-revenue base resources, and why we have not tried to actually look at other sectors. And I think they're talking about taxations and the rest. But you see, there are extent to which you can tax the people.
Should all the monies even come from tax?
There is extent to which you can tax the people. The people will be taxed only based on what they earn, and they cannot earn beyond what it is generated within the economy. So I don't know why we're still talking about basically oil and oil here. I don't know if you have another section, but I do not have, where the premise of this budget of income is based on any other thing beside oil. That is not good enough. I expect us now to begin to look at other sectors of income, to look at the solid minerals, what is coming on. But again, if you take the 2006 barrel of oil, and let us even assume that we are going to achieve that, we multiply it by $75. That act in itself can still not give us the 49 point something. Perhaps government somewhere, in their secret book has already made provision for incomes that will come. But I would have expected that we come back to the people like you observed earlier, where we can state basically to say, look, this percentage income will be coming from oil, and Y percentage will be coming from solid oil, and then this also will be coming from internal generations, taxations, and the rest. But one thing, again, that I want to talk about, since 1965, or the discovery of oil in Nigeria, we seem to have moved away from our comparative, from source of income where we have comparative advantage, and where virtually do we have comparative advantage is the agriculture. And I am sad and disappointed that is where we are given a paltry sum of
800 billion plus.
It looks to me that we are not serious. Besides, we are not taking food security seriously. It's like we continue to neglect.
So from this premise, can you say that economic hardship will linger?
Well,
because there's been talks.
I don't want to be a prophet of doom. I just, like I readily said, I want to think for government that from the service-wide vote, government intends.
But that's just your own assumption. We're not sure if they're going to do that.
The intervention, I want to believe that the president wants to make as often as possible intervention for agriculture from that place. Anything short of that, we are taking a very serious risk. I think by now we should be talking about how we return to the Granite Pyramid and how we return to the cocoa in the southwest and all where we have comparative advantage. In fact, if you ask me, by now we should be talking about value addition to these products before we export them. But it looks like we are not paying attention to our agricultural sector at all. Our attention, our emphasis continue to be on income generated from oil and oil only.
Now, let's even dwell more on this income generated from oil. We've seen the resuscitation of refineries in the country, starting from the Dangote refinery, Warri, Port Harcourt, and all of that. So does that improve the bearing, of the potential that some will say we are almost eating dry?
No, I don't. What do you mean by eating dry?
That is, we're almost depleting, what is not renewable.
There is a far more decisions to be taken. Yes, I agree that we have to provide for future generations and the rest. But listen, we must first survive at our own generation. Then we can talk about preparing for. Don't forget that we have not even touched our solid minerals at all. And from Ondo State, bitumen is there. There are gold in Elisha, gold in Zamfara, in Sokoto, and all whatnot. So that I still believe that beneath the ground there are still more than sufficient things, minerals for future generations. But the issue is there is a particular source of income that God has endowed: land, agriculture. That is what we should be paying attention. Before 1965, Nigeria, during the regional competitions, which was very good. The Southwest, the North, and the Southwest, they have the agricultural produce, and we were generating income from. That is what we should be paying attention to. Now, you were talking about, what again did you raise? We were talking about whether we have, what was it you spoke about? Whether we are depleting the oil.
The oil reserves, yes, that we have.
No, I think I've answered that. I don't think that is actually the issue that should be of concern. The issue that should be of concern is that what we earn from the oil now, how are we actually integrating it?
Now, I wanted to make, let's go back to the concern of the National Assembly as to regards low funding of capital expenditure. Do average Nigerians really benefit? Let's even talk about the ones that are existing, not to talk of the ones that the ones we demand more, that we are demanding more for.
Now, you see, the issue of low funding of capital budget lies fully on the executive. It is one thing for the legislative arm to make provisions for capital implementation. It is another thing for the executive arm to, as a matter of intentionally focus and make sure that funds that are dedicated for capital projects are safeguarded. And there must be an intention, a deliberate intention, and attention must be paid. This is lacking. This we have not seen. All right, it's been more and more. Like what I've just explained to you here, it has been more and more and more and more of daily running of government expenditure. And the reasons are not far-fetched. The reasons are not far-fetched because if you go into the body of the budget properly, you will see how much has been allocated to the presidency, how much has been allocated to various other ministries and departments under the presidency.
But this is the president that made mention of the fact that he's not running a bloated government. I'm sure you were privileged to watch the media chat. I mean, is that not a conversation we should be having?
You know, it amounts to being economics with the truth to say that you're not running a bloated government, whereas you've increased the ministries. You increase the ministries, the departments are not being managed. Some regional institutions have been created. So, I mean, how do you reconcile his statement, the statement of the president, with the reality on ground? Like I said,
when he makes the justification that over 200 million people is just too much of a number to govern, and you would have to establish these ministries to be able to deliver governance mandates to them.
I'm not making justification, but I am saying that contradicts.
But is it a good enough excuse?
I don't believe so. I don't believe it's a good excuse. We should be contracting, recurrent expenditure. How can we do that? It's by reducing, or shrinking the ministries and departments of government, not by recruiting. Now we're going to have the South Commission, the Development Commission. We have the Northeast already, the Southwest. I mean, this will definitely increase our recurrent expenditure. It could be argued to say they have been created so that they can enhance capital development in this region. Yes, capital development in this region can be established through other departments and ministries of government without creating new one. And if we do not create this and we channel the funds that will be channeled there into financing these capital projects in each of the regions, we would have been saving the current expenditure. But again, because politics, and because politicians are involved, job must be created for those who actually bring the government into being.
But when we talk about government jobs, how many Nigerians have access to these government jobs? When you do the maths, I mean, the way to, don't you think that the way to solve the problem of jobs is to strengthen the private sector? Because how many unemployed Nigerians can the government even employ if we say, okay, that is the justification to establish ministries and parastatals?
Yeah, I agree with you that the government in this budget, I'm still studying some part of this budget. I'm still looking at the understatements to them and the rest. Yeah, I agree with you that what government should do is to just, oil the economy and sometimes take some deliberate policy of funding, particularly the rail sector, which I think this government have not done alone. If government funds the rail sector, for example, the manufacturing sector and the rest, to create, give them cheaper funds, to create and generate employment and then manufacture things that and compete effectively with the imported goods. That will increase employment and generate employment.
Now, with some of these regional commissions being established, you also look at the Ministry of Livestock. When you look at the 2025 budget, do you see it weaponizing, this governance of handouts rather than building, capital developments amongst the people that will strengthen them to be able to contribute their quota to the development of the economy?
Well, again, I told you from the beginning of this interview that my purpose here is not for criticism. My purpose is to put it back, and so that we can see. And my purpose is to assist some of.
No, but you're not criticizing. You're just establishing the facts of what is on ground based on the budget that was presented.
To actually see that these are part of the basic issues that must be looked into and look at it. I have said it here, and I'm going to repeat that I do not believe that over-bloated bureaucracy will help our budget, particularly an economy that is borrowing so large and so much to finance a budget. I do not. There's no way I can support it by my training or even by practical terms. It is not a thing that should be encouraged.
All right. Well, I was still having conversations on the 2025 budget proposal, which is still before the National Assembly. And I'm sure before the ending of this week, we'll probably get a headway of whether it is going to be approved or not. Well, we'll take a quick breather. And when we come back, we'll also look into some of the concerns of civil society organizations and concerned non-governmental institutions and some of their reservations and discoveries on the 2025 budget. Honorable Mike is still with us. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.
What makes the political system what it is today? What are the recurring issues?
Order.
The tussle for power.
An extremely problematic area.
The tension. The instability of the system. Join Ellen 24/7 as we take you inside the local and international political arena in the world of politics.
Apologize for saying that I was corrupt.
I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
Watch politics now on Ellen 24/7.
Don't miss Politics Now on Ellen 24/7.
Many thanks for being with us on Politics Now. We're still deliberating the 2025 budget proposal before the National Assembly. Now, let's look at some other concerns being raised. Aside low funding for capital projects, concerns have been raised regarding omissions and irregularities in the budget. Let's share some thoughts from Budget Nigeria. We've got infographics for you so you can see what we're talking about. First, absence of budget breakdowns for key agencies such as the National Judicial Council and TED Fund. Then also budgets for a number of government-owned enterprises, including the Nigeria Ports Authority and the Nigerian Customs Service, which they say is missing. Also, the allocation of 2.49 trillion naira to regional development commissions under personal costs. Then also the exclusion of funding for the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Road. So let's start with the first one on the screen there. If we could have the graphic back up so we could actually break it down, because we have a lawmaker. I mean, you are in this business. You look at the absence of budget breakdowns for key agencies such as the National Judicial Council and TED Fund. Is this something that can be easily amended? Have you been in a situation whereby the budget just gets implemented without those breakdowns? And why is it important to actually have this breakdown before the public?
Now, the issue here is that if you go by laws that establish these agencies, I think sometimes we must take that into consideration. There are specific provisions, percentage, which are constitutional matters. So all you have to take is the percent. Take, for example, UBEC is about, is it 2 or 4%? So all you have to do is to just take the budget and then the percentage of that is...
and just give it to them directly.
Just give it to them. So I don't think this is the argument.
But what about the breakdown?
And again, listen, I've told you the breakdown, it is contained in the statutory transfer of 4.43 trillion. When you are criticizing or you want to take a look at the budget, take a holistic look at the budget. This budget stated very clearly that there is a statutory transfer of 4.43 trillion. Now, this statutory transfer refer to UBEC, refer to TED Fund and constitutional-based commissions that are there. The provisions in their percentage, it's already stated in the Constitution. So it's a matter of taking this 4.3 billion and then allocate it based on the statutory provisions, the percentage provision to the agencies. Let us work sometimes deep into this.
But don't you think the essence of a breakdown is to clearly follow the money? Because how do you follow the money if there is no breakdown?
No, if you go to the UBEC under...
but they are not talking to UBEC. Can we have the graphic back up again so we look at... I mean, it's okay. Sorry, you're obviously right. You were looking at the National Judicial Council and TED Fund, which is also part of
the provisions,
UBEC, so to speak.
The constitutional provisions are made for them. So I don't think we should overflow that.
You know, because why this concern is being raised? Because we've seen a situation whereby some particular government of agencies, you see them embarking on projects that really do not have, they don't really have any business.
Let me tell you what I would do. TED Fund, for example, is under the Treasury Institution Committee. So they will be coming with their budget before that committee. Are you getting what I'm saying? So the committee will be the one to scrutinize. This lump sum of the percentage is provided constitutionally. So the breakdown of their budget, and if you go through the budget breakdown inside, you will find it there. So they will be coming before the committee to defend their budget. You're talking about the judicial commission,
National Judicial Council. Yeah.
They will also be going before the Judicial Council. The provision, legal percentage stated as provision is there, vis-a-vis whatever they are going to present, right? Takes a look, go deep, you will find it in the Constitution. We are having about over 2,000 pages of this budget. We shouldn't be lazy. Let's take our time to take it head by head.
I doubt if budget is lazy, but let's look at the second one there. You see the budget for a number of government-owned enterprises, including the Nigerian Ports Authority and the Nigerian Customs Service, which are missing. Budget is not just going to glance through. This is a non-governmental organization.
I'm coming. The custom, for example, is under Ministry of Finance, isn't it? The President and Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance will be housing a whole sum of 7.51 trillion. I don't know whether you check it. 17 point something, 51 trillion of it. Now, I am sure that part of these agencies and the rest who are directly responsible to either the presidency or the Ministry of Finance are a part of the 17.51 trillion. Again, let us go into the budget. I have not taken my time, seriously. I cannot just sit down here and begin to criticize or agree with figures that have been thrown at me by anybody. Maybe after this, if we're going to have a follow-up.
But, you know, the essence of this criticism is actually to get government in check.
Yes.
Because one thing that as a journalist, one thing with this Tinubu administration, if there is a public outcry on a particular thing, the president will always act on the checks and balances being preferred. Like when he traveled to COP and there were complaints about reducing cost of governance. So that's why these conversations, I think, are very necessary.
I disagree with you. I disagree with you that to say that Mr. President has been reacting.
Not on all cases.
I want to.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, sir.
You're talking as if you are generalizing, When we reacted about the increments in fuel price, what we got was an additional increase. So that is not very true. When we've been criticizing, people have been talking about cost of government. What we got in return is establishment of regional. There's, for me, no other things could be more critical in criticism of government
than those. I get your point.
That are put in place. The first problem I had with this budget was my inability to lay hands on the performance of the 2024 budget. If I had been able, then I would have been able to juxtapose them with whatever provision we have in now, and then comes to a logical conclusion of what is expected. But like I said in the beginning, we're going to take just what we have here, discuss it, and on the basis of that, what our expectations are. And I was talking about 17.518 trillion as funds under this budget, clearly stated, being warehoused under Ministry of Finance. And we have another service-wide vote of 2.578 trillion. When you talk about custom, I also talks about poor funding of agriculture, I assume, and the rest. Because if you are having over 20 trillion of funds, that is we've been warehoused, and from a total budget of about 49 point something. So what has been actually accounted for will be about 29 point something trillion budget. So I agree with you that we must beam enough such light into the 2025 budgets. Before it gets implemented. Okay, let's see what the National Assembly will do.
Okay, now just before we move forward, I want us to look at the last 2 points on that graphic again. If editor could help us with it. Thank you so much. Now, what do you make of this? 2.49 trillion to regional development under personnel costs.
Well, I've told you already, from the very beginning, I've told you that we are increasing recurrent expenditure. Now, the reason for that is not far-fetched. You are establishing a new organizations. We're going to buy vehicles, we're going to buy furniture, we're going to employ personnel. It's not as if you are deploying. On the surface, we say they are creating employment, but they are creating employment salaries that are increasing our recurrent expenditures. And that was why I told you earlier I would have preferred a situation where this 2-point-something trillion is channeled to established institutions, to directly fund these projects, in each of these regions, than you establishing a brand new regional establishment that is going to incur this humongous amount of money, cost on recurrent expenditure. I've said this earlier. And again, if you look at the major headings of this budget, the personnel, overhead, pension, service-wide votes, capital supplementations, statutory transfers, debt service, and the rest, you will discover that the personnel cost is recurrent, the overhead is recurrent, pension is recurrent, service-wide runs largely recurrent, and capital supplementations I mean, it depends on the decisions of government and the rest. Perhaps they intend to finance the regional establishment from that particular account. The statutory transfers, I mean, we cannot have more than 40% of that sum of 4.3 billion on capital budgetary orders are going into recurrent. You take debt services, 16.3, purely recurrent expenditure. And then for me, the main capital development of this budget is 9.912 trillion. And that is paltry. Then it will not be far-fetched from what the Ministry of Finance talks about capital financing of 25% of the previous year. At the end of the day, if you take 9.92 trillion as a percentage of 4.49.7, you may eventually at the end of the year arrive at about 22, 25 to maximum 27% of capital funding. So the picture is getting clearer from the very beginning. And unfortunately, most of the time, it is the recurrent budget that is fully funded, that is fully implemented by the ministry. They will exhaust the money, no return. And one thing again I discovered in this particular budget, and why I was not comfortable about changing the calendar from January to December, extending to December, is that there are funds. Now, beside the fact that they are not funded enough, the capital projects are not funded enough, there are projects that have been funded. Are you getting what I'm talking about now? The money has been released to all agencies, but they have not been paid out. They have to be returned. They have to be reabsorbed into the system. Extending the capital budget from December to that creates room, in my opinion, for corruption, for abuse of office, rushing issues. It will not allow for critical supervisions of project. It will not allow for scrutinizing the objective of the project very well. I don't feel comfortable about it at all, because funds are supposed to be returned to the coffer. And by now, we should be talking about how much has been closed into the coffers of each ministry department that have to be returned into central bank. So.
But of course, that's going to take also political will on the part of the lawmakers to call for these agencies to give account as at when due. We've seen situations whereby the Senate and the House of Assembly will call for people, especially heads of government parastatals and agencies and ministries, to come for regular hearing at the Senate to give accounts, and some of them don't even show up. So how has that frustrated, the efforts of your oversight functions in the National Assembly?
Well, it's been long I left the National Assembly, but I can tell you that while I'm there, and particularly in the Night Assembly, I think that was a deliberate attempt, actually, to monitor over 10 years how well this MDAs has complied with returning funds, surplus funds. There was a particular committee that was set in place in the House of Representatives. I think it was chaired by my very good friend, Francis Charles, and significant amount of revelations were made, and significant amount of additional funds were actually refunded to central banks and the rest. So it is not for lack of trying of the parliaments, of the members of the National Assembly most of the time. It is the implementations of these resolutions, motions passed by the executive. It is one thing for the parliament to pass a motion. It's another thing for the executive to actually comply by that. And again, I don't know whether you permit me to actually look at one of the reasons why the parliament, the National Assembly, is handicapped. If you take a total budget. And I'm not saying, not really. I mean, I was in the 8th Assembly. I think we did our best. And I don't think, no, you see, no parliamentarians will want to be happy or accept to be a rubber stamp to an executive arm of government. But because there are constraints, because a lot of study has not been taken, and because they are over-criticized by the public. I kept on saying this thing, and I'll keep on saying it. I want to believe generally, and it is expected because these are your representatives in government. But again, take a look at, put the judiciary and the executive together in this budget, they are taking less than 1.7%. 1.7% of the total budget in 2025.
Does that justify the amounts that they are earning at the moment?
In fact, you see, when you talk about the earnings of the National Assembly, the questions, every time I come here to speak with you, listen, let me tell you one thing. It's better experience. It's better experience. The other time I was here, I told you, have anybody, including you journalists, taken time to say what is the requirement? What is the requirement of an average parliamentarian to do his job successfully in Nigeria? All we do is to take, sometimes even over bloated, because I remember when I was in the National Assembly, they were talking about 25 million, 17 million, which was a far-fetched amount of what we were taking as running grant, not as salary. We must get this thing right, as running grants, not even as salary. My salary as a member of the National Assembly was about 1.2. After you make all deductions and the rest will come back to about 800 or 900,000 naira per month. What people were talking about us at that time and still talking about is the running grant. And it is nobody's fault. It's not a member, it's not a problem of the National Assembly members that you brought about a policy that tried to monetize every garden things, Were we talking about this in 1983 Assembly? Were we talking about in 1965 Assembly and the rise? No, because most of the things that have been monetized now, we are being provided for the legislators. So who has taken time actually to study what are the requirements? We sit on a daily basis after electing the people, just say they earn too much, they earn too much. Is this really an earning? Is it really earning? They are making accounts for whatever you give to them as running grant every month, every quarter. If you do not make account of returns to the required agencies. But now let me explain this issue. Every time I try to explain this issue. Yes. Yes. No, 1.5, 1.3.
Okay, compare that to the average salary that the average Nigerian civil servant is earning.
All over the world, let me tell you, listen to me, all over the world, do the politicians in government earn at the rate or earn at the parameters of what public services earn? No, not even in the most advanced democracy of the world. Now, the reason it's not perfect, excuse me, please. No, you are.
What I want you to see is because of the economic hardship that Nigerians are facing.
I am not here to defend the National Assembly. We are here to discuss.
No, you're speaking as someone who has served there.
Who has seen it.
I get your point of view. You know all that it takes to represent a constituency and to be there for them, to provide for them, to get projects to them. I understand what you're talking about. But the frustration of the average Nigerian is when they don't see improvements in their day-to-day living. That frustration definitely comes on you. Because if they see that you are taking millions of naira
I was trying to explain
as allocations monthly.
Listen, I was trying to explain certain things and to advise the public, but you didn't allow me to get to where I'm going. I started by saying, if you put the judiciary and the legislative arm together, this budget, they will be allocated to them is less than 2%, it's about 1.7% of the total budget. Now, about 98% of this budget today is squarely in the hands of the executive. But what would you have? Rather than the public to pay more attention into monitoring the public projects that are domiciled, that are under the executive arm of government, their attention will be on less than 2%.
And don't you think that's not far-fetched? Because you are the ones to hold the government accountable.
Responsible, but the
RFMCA, the agency responsible for this.
And which I think some of
Is it those who are helpless that you think will help?
The emphasis, sometimes when the public talk, you journalists talk.
But
I
you
am
are
sure
the
even
ones.
people who will be watching me today will say that is one of them. It's not the issue of being one of them.
No,
the issue is that you must also help
But they are helping. If they are putting pressure on you, why don't you take the pressure on the executive?
Of course, I believe the National Assembly is doing their best. Of course, look at the budget.
But it's not the case. It's not the case for some Nigerians, because you find that there are bills that the president brings to the National Assembly. In a twinkle of an eye, it is passed. Then when you talk about bills that will probably improve the democratic process, whether it is through the Electoral Act bills or other bills that Nigerians are more concerned about, they stall at the National Assembly, and that calls for concerns from the common man.
Let me answer your question on the basis of bill being passed. There are some bills that needs urgency that will be passed, and there are some bills that actually need total scrutiny. Are you following what I'm trying to say? Now, I have this analogy. When two elephants fight, the grass will suffer. It's equal to say that when two elephants romances, the grass will also
like we saw in the night assembly.
Now,
right?
I'm not talking about any assembly, please pardon me. Now, we must try to strike a balance. While it is not for the National Assembly to be totally and always in confrontation with the executive, it's also not welcome that they enter into total romance with the executive. Therefore, when you look at some urgent attention being paid to a particular bill, go through it and evaluate the importance of such bill while it is necessary at that particular time. Once you do that, then you can now see why the urgency of the bill. It is not always that when a bill is treated urgently, that it brings corruption, that it brings rubber stamping. It is not always like that. We must not see it. We must look at it critically from the importance of that particular bill to the generality of the people.
All right. Well, our time is almost up. I was hoping I'll be able to ask you some questions about the lingering political crisis in the PDP, and of course, as a member of the party, for you to weigh your thoughts on what's going on. We heard reports of the secretaries, who are laying claim to the secretariat of the PDP, which caused kind of an uproar, and police had to intervene with what is actually going on between Okoye and Anyanwu. If you could just say a few things.
Yeah, but I thought you said our time is fast spent.
I know, okay, 2 minutes for you to say
I would have preferred that you allow us to actually pay more attention to national issues.
But time is
But you see, I am a member of the PDP, and I cannot shy away from it. It's very important always that as members of a political party, or any organization or society for that matter, that we pay serious attention and we respect the constitution of that organization. As far as Okoye and Anyanwu is concerned, my position will remain by the positions of the constitution of the PDP. And if the judgment of the court is in consonance with the provision of the PDP constitution, I will advise that we abide by that decision and then we move ahead. Now, the time is short. The growth of the PDP, and if we want to come back to power, if we want to continue to be relevant, it's very, very simple. Internal reconciliation. There is a committee put in place now headed by General Onyolola and some prominent eminent. I want them to do work. If PDP want to win election, it is not talking about merger. We are large, we are big. It's supposed to be how are we going back to our former members? How are we reconciling between our former members who are in APC, who are in Labour Party, how to come back and to take power? Talking about merger, talking about acquisition right now for me, it's another way of providing way for APC to continue. We know where our problems are. Our problems are today in APC is between Wike and Atiku. That is the truth. There is no two sides to it. If we want to begin to win elections, we must be able to find a way, midway, to reconcile these two people, to bring them together as leaders of our party, and bring back people who have left our party. Then we agree that we want to go back. Don't forget that this problem started from new PDP, new something, NPPP that time. That's how it started. Some of those people who went through that, the new PDP at that time, are still in APC. Some of them have gone to SDP. Some of them are in Labour Party. So all we have to do, if we want to begin to win election again as a political party, is to bring back those who are left, is to reconcile them, and above all, to live by the tenets and provisions of the constitution of the party.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Honorable Mike Omogbenyi. It's been a pleasure having you with us. Share your thoughts on the 2025 budget proposal. Well, that's the much we can take. We're out of time. Honorable, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
All right. Yeah, and that's our show for today. Once again, my name is Mono Balagogo. Don't forget to visit our website, www.ln247.news, for more news updates and, of course, political stories. We'll see you next time. Stay with us.